Welcome to the Jewish Roots portion of Faith for Today. You know, the early Christian church celebrated all the festivals of what we would think as Jewish feasts, but they're really not Jewish feasts.
No, they're the Lord's feasts.
The book of Leviticus says these are my feasts, says the Lord's. And Jesus, Yeshua, celebrated all of them. And
yes,
so
he
Pentecost was one. Sabbath he celebrated. Tabernacles he celebrated.
Yes.
And
Yom
Pesach he celebrated. In Yom Kippur. These were all festivals not only of Yeshua, but also festivals that the early Christians practiced and observed.
Yes, they did.
And people will say to us, how did those disappear? I mean, if in fact that's what Jesus did, where on earth did we, the church, ever come to forgetting about those feasts?
Right.
And that was in the time of Constantine.
Yes.
When Constantine supposedly converted to Christianity, he brought in a whole Gentile way of thinking. And the leaders of the Gentile church became more and more those who really had no experience of their Jewish roots, and in fact became increasingly anti-Semitic, anti-Jewish roots. And so by the time of the 300s and 400s, there was this big movement away from the very roots and foundations of the Bible itself. Now, if you think about that, we experienced that in our own nation. We were a nation rooted in the Bible, rooted in tremendous faith in God. Our forefathers, when they framed our Constitution, did so with God in mind, with the Bible in mind.
Word in mind. That's right.
And we haven't even made it to 300 years yet, and already the nation is pulling away from its biblical roots. In the 1800s, the Supreme Court said, we are a Christian nation.
That's right.
And now there's great concern about that.
Yes.
We're open to all. Well, while we're open to all...
Hasn't the statement been made by our Commander-in-Chief that we are not a Christian nation?
That's right. So we've come in less than 300 years, we've come to a point where we have a president of the United States who denies the Christian roots of our country, denies the fact that the Founding Fathers set something in motion that was meant to last forever. We have a Congress, for example, that passes laws that they will admit probably are not covered by the Constitution, or maybe are outside their rights as a Congress to do. So we have a nation that in less than 300 years is making a radical departure from the vision and the foundation of our forefathers.
That's right.
So it shouldn't surprise us that in 300 years, with an influx of Gentiles into the Church of Jesus, Gentiles who didn't know their Jewish roots, Gentiles who wanted to bring along some of their pagan practices and pagan concepts, as they began to come into the body of Yeshua, and the church grew in the Gentile world, they didn't want to have anything to do with their roots.
No, they didn't.
But interestingly...
And weren't they forbidden to? Wasn't there a decree that went forth that they were forbidden to follow and observe any of these feasts, and that you were in great trouble if you were found to be following either the Sabbath or one of these feasts?
As late, Donna, as 600 A.D., we have the popes issuing decrees that priests in the Catholic Church are not allowed to observe the Sabbath, which is Saturday, nor are they allowed to observe the Jewish festivals. So up onto 500, 600, 700 A.D., there were Christians.
Doing it. They had to be forbidden to do it.
That's right.
It's not like they dropped it. It means that they had to. A decree had to go forth saying, "You will not do this," which means they were doing it.
That's right. And so now we jump forward, and we jump forward to 1000, 1500, and we come up to 2000 A.D.
Yeah.
And we're now living in a day and an age of the resurgence of Christians around the world. This isn't an American thing. It's not a narrow thing, but across denominations, across theological spectrums, and around the world, from Korea to Australia to Sweden, South America, you will find churches and men and women who are embracing the Jewish roots of Christianity, who are rediscovering how alive their Christian faith becomes when they understand what it's rooted in. And there's a great volume of it happening,
Yes.
even though maybe in our own area here of Fitchburg, this might seem to be a new thing, or to some people a bizarre thing, but it really is happening around the world. You know, I think if we look at books, we have an extensive library here. We have, I think, probably one of the most extensive sections in our library on Jewish roots, as well as on Judaism itself, understanding where we come from.
That's right.
And we want to share some of those thoughts with you today, just to give you a highlight of what's going on and how many people are writing books about what's happening. Donna, why don't you hand me those first 3 books right there, and let's just take a look. And these are in no particular order. Here's a book called Yeshua, A Guide to the Real Jesus and the Original Church.
Yes.
Written by Dr. Ron Mosley, has a foreword in it by Marvin Wilson, who teaches at the seminary I graduated from, Gordon Conwell. And in this book, Dr. Mosley talks about what the law means and what it doesn't mean. He talks about the role of the Pharisees and the different types of Pharisees, and the fact that Yeshua himself was one type of a Pharisee. He was more lined up with the theology of the Pharisees than anyone else.
That's right.
And so we have Yeshua, a guide to the real Jesus and the original church. And then we have a book by Dan Juster called Jewish Roots, a Foundation of Biblical Theology. And this is another extensive book on Paul and Yeshua and the life of the Messianic Church. Again, written so that we might understand
Who they really were.
And the fact that Christianity has Jewish roots. I know that's new for some people.
That's right.
Here's a book, a biography called A Gentile with a Heart of a Jew. It's about C. Douglas Young, who was a theologian who really embraced his Hebrew roots as a Christian and began to believe that really he was a Gentile, but he had the heart of a Jew.
That's right.
Now think about it. If you're born again, if you're made again in the image of Yeshua, if you're in his family, then you literally have a brand new heart.
Yes, you do.
But it is the heart of a Jew.
Yes, it is.
Because that's who God's chosen people are. And when we got this book, A Gentile with the Heart of a Jew, I thought of the name of our own church, Faith Christian Church, a Christian church with a Jewish heart. And all that means is we are trying to understand our Jewish roots. Why don't you grab me some more of those books there?
Certainly.
We'll just work our way if they fall over. These are just typical from our library. Here is the David Stern's Messianic Jewish Manifesto, which is an extensive theological explanation of the scriptures and how they support Messianic Judaism, what it means to be a Jew who believes in Yeshua. You know, when you come to believe in Yeshua as a Jew, you don't become a Christian.
No, you don't.
If you stop and think about it, the term Christian wasn't even used during the first years of the church.
No.
So that when Peter on the day of Pentecost said, when they said to him, "What must we do?" he said, "You need to be baptized, you need to receive Yeshua as your Lord, and turn from your sin and enter the kingdom of God." Well, they didn't become Christians. They were still Jews. They went to the synagogue, they celebrated the festivals, they dipped in the mikveh. They were very Jewish. They were simply Messianic Jews. I like what Pastor Shad says. Therefore, that must mean that we are Messianic Gentiles. Because we're brought up as Gentiles. You don't become a Jew.
No.
If you're a Gentile, you don't become a Jew when you receive the Jewish Messiah, Yeshua. But you become engrafted, says Paul, or grafted into the Jewish family. So we're Gentile, but we're grafted into a Jewish Messianic person. Here's Jesus, the Jewish Theologian, by Brad Young. And again, trying to look at the teachings of Jesus as a Jewish theologian. And you read a book like this and you find out how the parables, how much of the sayings of Yeshua take on an added meaning when we think that Jesus was a Jew.
Yes.
He thought like a Jew. He taught beyond what the other rabbis did, but a lot of his teaching was in the line of rabbinic teaching. He definitely was a Jewish theologian.
Yes, he was.
Marvin Wilson, who teaches about Jewish roots at Gordon College, wrote a book called Our Father Abraham, The Jewish Roots of the Christian Faith. And it's probably one of the key books, I think, if you want to get an evangelical book that's written by an evangelical theologian who understands the Jewish roots of Christianity and what that means. Our Father Abraham is a good book to have.
Yes.
Here's a book by Nehemiah Gordon called The Hebrew Yeshua versus the Greek Jesus. If you really want to understand, well, what's so wrong with what we believed? You read a book like this and you understand how much of our theology, how much of our image of Jesus has been formed by a Greek mindset. And we don't even know it. I mean, we grew up with it. But there is a Hebrew Yeshua who appears quite different.
That's right.
In fact, even when we look in our education curriculum, Donna, how often did we see Jesus pictured as what? Blonde
hair, blue eye.
He looks like a Norwegian.
He's a Middle Easterner. You know,
That's right.
How can he be having that blonde hair and the blue eyes?
I have a Jewish friend of ours who loves to tell his Christian friends that Jesus' real name is Yeshua.
That's right.
That when his mother, Mary, who would be called Miriam, when Miriam went to call him, she didn't go to the door of her house and cry out, Jesus, Jesus. She cried out, Yeshua, Yeshua, because you see, that was his name. Sandra Teplinsky has written a book called The Blessing of Israel, What Christians Need to Know to Intercede for the Jewish People. She's written a number of books about Jewish roots.
Which is a good thing because it's the word itself says those who bless Israel will be blessed.
That's right. And then if you're going to understand Jewish roots, you got to understand the Jewish festivals. So here's a book by Barney Kasdan, God's Appointed Time, not man's appointed time.
That's right.
Not Christmas, which Gentiles decided to celebrate, or Easter, which has a lot of pagan things about it. Right. But what are God's appointed times?
That's right.
What did God say we should be doing?
That's right.
There's dozens of books out there written by that. And we're only going through one half of them here.
That's right.
Here's a book by Tim Hegg called Fellow Heirs, Jews and Gentiles Together in the Family of God.
That's right.
And he leads a messianic organization and talks about what does it mean for Jews and Gentiles together to have a Jewish Messiah.
One new man.
One new man in him. Here's an interesting book by the theologian D. Thomas Lancaster called Restoration, Returning the Torah of God to the Disciples of Jesus. Right. You see, how many contemporary believers, followers, whatever you want to call them, of Jesus have lost hold of what the Torah is. Now, you know, when you talk about things like this, some pastors get very nervous.
Yes.
Some pastors say, are you trying to put people under the law again? Well, no, we're not definitely not doing that. We're saved by grace. Paul's very clear about that. Yeshua's very clear about that.
That's right.
But where did we move when we moved from getting out from under legalism, where we threw out the whole Torah of God?
That's right.
The early church didn't do that. Paul did not do that. No. Yeshua said, I did not come to break the law. And yet, much of the modern church has lost hold of the value of the Torah. Yes. And so the theologian D. Thomas Lancaster wrote Restoration, returning the Torah of God to the disciples of Yeshua. Then you have a Roman Catholic, Samuel Baccellici, I think is his name, but he wrote biblical perspectives on how did we move from Sabbath to Sunday. It is the historical investigation of the rise of Sunday observance in early Christianity. And by the way, this is a book that the Pontifical Gregorian University Press publishes. So it is published by a Roman Catholic press. He's the first non-Catholic to graduate from the Pontifical Gregorian University in Rome. And this was his doctoral thesis, and it was accepted by the Roman Church to be published, and it's the history of how on earth did the church drop celebrating Sabbath and start celebrating Sunday. And you'll be shocked to find out that wasn't what the early Christians did.
No, it wasn't.
They celebrated the Lord's Day on Sabbath because that's the day, he said. And in fact, the scriptures say at the end of time, all of humanity will be back to observing Sabbath. Right. But here we have a man who wrote within the Roman Catholic Church a document saying, how on earth did the church move from Sabbath to Sunday? What's behind that story anyway? Right. Excellent book you ought to read. Well, let's see if we can grab the last three on that side, Donna. Right. Here's a book by Ray Pritz, Nazarene Jewish Christianity. It's a study of the early Nazarenes, or the early believers in Yeshua. They went to synagogue just like everyone else did.
Yes, they did.
There were the rabbinic Jews, and there were the Nazarene Jews, or the followers of the way, or the Messianic Jews. And what were they like, and how did they worship?